Let's talk about dyscalculia, or dyscalculia if you're not Southern and you want to say all the syllables. Dyscalculia is a neurotype, a learning disability in math. I was recognized dyscalculia when I took the SAT. I scored a perfect score on the verbal, and I only got about little bit more than 25% of the math right. When I read about dyscalculia on the internet and the way that it's talking about my mind, I feel so frustrated because I don't experience math difficulties like a 7-year-old child. I am able to use a calculator. I'm able to use a calendar. I am able to decide whether I want to look at a digital clock or an analog clock. So a lot of the things that they say about dyscalculic children, very young children, simply do not apply to me as an adult that's able to use tools to help fill in the blanks in my math skills. I have no memory for numbers. Like, I cannot hold numbers in my head for very long at all. They get switched and flipped around, they get forgotten and mixed up. So anything like addresses, dates, phone numbers, I have to have those things written down. When I was a costumer, this was particularly difficult because when I was taking measurements of people, I would often get things confused between the measuring tape and then writing the measurement down. I would use my thumb and hold my thumb on the tape measure that I couldn't forget so that I could directly see it. Because anything that I can see is way easier for me to understand the math concept. I understand concepts of tens because of having fingers and toes. Those concepts are easier for me to grasp. For example, I always leave a 20% tip because it's a formula that I have memorized and can figure out on the fly again and again. I'm not able to do math quickly in my head because of not being able to memorize numbers. Not because I can't understand addition, subtraction, things like that. It did take me much longer to gain those skills than it took some of my classmates. And when they took the visual aids away, like math manipulatives, like little plastic bears or number lines and things like that in about 3rd grade, that's when my dyscalculia really began to show up. The internet says that I can't learn math, but that simply isn't true. I just don't learn math well the way that it's typically taught in schools. Often I have my own creative ways of solving math or logic problems. Also, as an adult today, I can understand math concepts. I'm able to understand simple physics, logic, the chemical transformations of cooking and baking. I understand time and some of the concepts of quantum mechanics. And I understand simple engineering. I cannot understand the numerical minutia behind those verbal concepts. And I couldn't write proofs or formulas out to express my understanding, but I do actually understand some of these scientific, mathematic, engineering, or logical concepts. I did quite well in geometry, and I've used that a lot in costume and pattern making, puppet building, set design, and choreography. Again, there's always something visual, and there's like a 3-dimensional aspect to geometry that I can understand somehow. It's like math I can touch and see. I cannot keep score during games, and I am bad at making change or doing math when I'm being watched. My mental map is quite dodgy. GPS does work for me, but a paper map, actually where I can see the whole big picture and being able to read through steps, is more helpful than GPS. I like to maybe even look at Street View and look at landmarks and stuff, so I have a really, again, a 3-dimensional image that I'm going to use, and the GPS is just like notes to remind me of it. Cannot memorize the formulas or even multiplication tables. I also have trouble memorizing things like scripts, choreography, songs, sheet music. I can do it, but it takes me 4 to 10 times more repetition than my castmates. And it also takes me a really long time to memorize like the layout of somebody's house or their kitchen. I'm actually very good at math adjacent skills like measuring, laying out stripes and plaids, designing, estimating lengths of less than 25 feet. Like I can look at something and guess how much fabric I need to cover it, or how long it is from here to there, or short distances. As an adult today, dyscalculia is mainly accommodated by my smartphone. Contacts, GPS, my notes app, calendar, autosave passwords and card numbers, and of course, the calculator. I may have never been able to memorize my times tables or Pythagorean's theorem, but I do understand the concepts, and I can use a calculator or visual aids, or I can write things out in my own way, my own self-invented mathematical language. I do math, I just do it differently, and I cannot hold any of it in my mind. It has to be written down or seen. For me, dyspraxia shows up as things like clipping corners, either in when I'm driving or like when I'm walking around like a hallway or a doorway. And I often turn the opposite way in dance class. I drop things when I'm multitasking. Say I'm walking across the street and I'm holding a cup of coffee. When I get to the curb on the other side, if I'm not paying attention and remembering to hold the cup of coffee, as I go to step up onto the curb and my brain starts talking to my foot, I drop that cup of coffee. I lose my way. I get physical instructions or directions kind of mixed up. I have a hard time memorizing those things. I might get turned around inside a building or a parking garage where I can't see landmarks. I have kind of funky posture, a head forward, rounded shouldered posture, and a remarkable walk. A lot of people have remarked on the way that I walk. They don't necessarily like put me down for it, but they do mention that it is unique. And I have a unique dance style. I have to pay attention in order to move gracefully and fluidly, to not drop or lose things. It requires mindfulness, like my autopilot is broken. And it therefore requires energy or battery usage, and it doesn't drain me and make me tired. So if I'm at a time of the month where my hormones are high, or I have lost sleep, or I'm not feeling well, I'm ill, during those times my dyspraxia traits are much more exaggerated. Dyspraxia for me is something that I worked on a lot as I was growing up, growing into a teenage girl. The clumsiness, falling down, having injuries, getting bruised, the embarrassment of that was just mortifying. So starting when I was about 11, I simply looked at the ground everywhere I was going so that I would not trip. And I became hyper aware of obstacles in my environment. I wanted to move gracefully. I associated that with femininity, and I practiced through cheerleading, dance, and gymnastics, and then later through years of hoop training. That mental effort helped me hack my mind chatter. Through masking my dyspraxia, I learned the flow state of conscious fluid movement. I accidentally found movement meditation. I also allowed myself to stim by practicing these movements. Repetitive, highly focused, rhythmic movements. Cheerleading or gymnastics, practicing it over and over and over and over again. And I practiced large and small gestures. Little things like facial expressions in the mirror over and over again to make them try to look graceful and natural. And I practiced big movements like kicks or splits or jumps. Stimming and the pleasure that I get from this type of practice is also how I learned to be a pretty good hula hooper. Learning hoop tricks required me to do repetitive movements over and over, and that made me super calm. And because it felt good to my body mind, I was able to overcome demand avoidance and keep practicing and keep playing around with it. Basically, I used the flow state to not let demand avoidance make me quit hooping. I was able to get really good at something because of the way that it made my nervous system feel.